Hi, Kelleigh from Rosendale. According to the Commerce Department, corporate profits are at their highest level in at least 85 years, with after-tax profits annually amounting to around 10% of GDP. Meanwhile, employee compensation is at the lowest level in 65 years, and the gap between rich and poor has climbed to levels not seen since the 1920s. Corporations have not been investing much of their extra profits in workers and jobs, instead spending large portions on hefty CEO pay packages and business acquisitions that raise stock prices. So, given their record profits, why do you think corporations need a tax cut now? And if their taxes are reduced, what makes you think they will do things differently and contribute to an economy that works for all of us instead of trickling the profits up to the wealthy few?
Cutting into my time. So here's what I would say. We live in a global economy. All of these large U.S. companies, for instance, of the ones that you would typically cite, are companies that compete overseas. The U.S. corporate tax rate at 35% is among the highest in the world. So for instance, in Canada, the statutory tax rate is 15%. So Ireland, it's 12.5%. So many of the countries that we are competing against have much more favorable tax environments than the United States does. So here's the big problem as I see it. If you have a company, the biggest exporter in the United States is Boeing. Caterpillar is a big exporter. Obviously, our internet companies like Google and Apple make enormous amounts of money overseas as well. What is happening to the corporate profits that they earn overseas? They're being kept overseas. The United States multinational companies now have $2.7 trillion worth of U.S. corporate profits stashed abroad, not coming home. Why? Because the U.S. virtually alone among all of our international competitors would subject those profits, if they were brought home, to double taxation. So they pay, Boeing or GE pays taxes where they sell a product overseas. And then if they bring their profit home, they get taxed again in the U.S. So that's why you have $2.7 billion stashed abroad. It's called this concept of repatriation. So one reason why we should be looking at reforming the corporate tax system to make our companies more competitive, both domestically and internationally, is that we don't want them to have this perverse incentive to leave their profits overseas. So I agree with you. It's very easy to look at, whether it's the CEO salary or whether, frankly, it's a shortstop salary and say, my goodness, why do they have to earn so much? Frankly, I'm more inclined to let the market decide those things. But and shareholders and corporations, if they don't follow their shareholders' wishes, are going to find themselves taken over by someone else. Yeah. So I do think though we need reform of our corporate tax law, primarily to deal with this problem of the lack of repatriation of those profits from overseas.
Can I ask a follow-up? According to the Government Accountability Office, the average effective tax rate of profitable corporations in the United States is around 14%. And also, it seems that in 1986, when under President Reagan, when those tax cuts happened for corporations in order to compete internationally, it was an international race to the bottom, and lots of other countries lowered their tax rates as a result.
Well, I think that when you talk about the effective tax rate, you have to consider the fact that that's one of the issues that we face. A lot of companies have lobbyists, and they've gone to Washington, and they have negotiated special deals for themselves to reduce their corporate tax rates. And so there are preferences and deductions and other special exemptions that have been created in the tax code. I mean, the tax code, look, is about 200 times longer than the Bible, for instance. I mean, it is grossly cumbersome, it is grossly complicated, and it makes it much more difficult for our companies, frankly, to compete overseas. So I want to see a leaner, flatter tax code where everyone pays their fair share and people don't benefit from special exemptions and deductions, which is exactly why you get an effective corporate tax rate of 14% for some companies. GE, for instance, many years pays 0. And it's because of special exemptions and deductions that, frankly, a lot of those should be eliminated from the tax code.
Do you commit to not voting for tax policy that will cut?
I think that our ground rules are that one follow-up question will be...
I'll give up my question to get Kelleigh's.
I agree.
If you want to create a market for questions, that's a worthy implementation of Congressman Faso's idea. Now let's move along. Let's move along in an orderly fashion.
I would only just add that my view is that this whole entire issue of tax reform is a very fluid thing. So I couldn't commit to vote for or against something that isn't even written yet. And I don't think you would expect me to do that. I want to read it, I want to know it, I want to understand it before I would commit my vote one way or the other.